Good evening. This is a meeting of the Committee of the Community and Economic Development Council, or Community and Economic Development Committee. It is February 28th, and it is 6:01. We have tonight discussed a couple of things. We want to discuss any future actions related to the moratorium on construction of parking lots in the historic downtown. And number two, to provide a recommendation to council regarding approving the vacation of utility easements between in-lots 11308 and in-lot 11309 in the Heritage Village at Troy Country Club subdivision, and authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to execute any documents relating to the easement. Why don't we take that one first? Would you have anything to comment, Mr. Titterington?
No, only that the reason that they're asking for the easement to be vacated is that one property owner bought both lots.
Didn't we handle that last year?
No.
It was another lot.
That was another lot. Okay, got it. It's very similar circumstances,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
Okay. Open committee discussion on any discussion, questions? Do we have a preference of what we want to do here tonight on this? I think
Move forward with it.
move forward with it. I think we can just go ahead and move forward with that, Mr. Titterington.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Okay. Now we're going to discuss any future actions relating to the moratorium on construction of parking lots in the historic downtown. To give you a little bit of background on it, I think it was on the committee meeting on November 8th of this committee. The committee had come up with the following. It is a recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared to establish a 90-day moratorium on the construction of new surface parking lots in the Historic Preservation Overlay District, where such parking lots would be considered the principal use of that property and not accessory to a different principal use. And it was emergency legislation. And again, that was approved by council on November 15th. We have gone past the 90 days, and so currently there is no moratorium in place. And during that time period, the council was asked to review 6 studies on parking in the downtown, including the 1960 Harlan Bartholomew and Associates Street Study, the Wolpert Downtown Parking Study of 1996, the 2017 MKSK Riverfront Study, the 2017 Wolpert Downtown Parking Study, and then the 2019 Albert Parking Study, and 2020 Downtown Troy Conceptual Design Preliminary Financial Analysis by Walker. And I've got a little test for everybody to take, so just pull out your number 2 pencil and we'll get started on that. Just kidding. Anyway, I did have the opportunity to draft a summary of this. I don't know if everybody's read that, but I think we have a couple of questions that we need to maybe talk about, maybe to open the discussion. Number one, does this committee feel that the moratorium has served its purpose, or does this committee make a recommendation to City Council to reinstate the moratorium? If the committee recommends a reinstatement, what reason do we use? And again, if it's a consensus of this committee that the construction of new principal use surface parking lots in the Historic Preservation Overlay District is not in the best interest of the City of Troy, then what steps can this committee recommend to City Council to prohibit the construction of such lots? So those are a couple of questions I came up with. I'll open the floor for discussion. Mrs. Sneed, Mr. Pierce, do you have any questions or comments or on anything so far?
I guess I would just say that I'm not sure if I know that anything has changed since we put the first moratorium in, and I don't know if there is any plan to go forward with anything to replace surface parking lots. So if we're still of the mind that we don't want those in the overlay district as a principal use, then we're probably in favor of another moratorium to get us to the point that we're looking at something different.
This would normally go to the planning commission if we don't put the moratorium on it. Is that accurate?
I think without anything in place, then any
Well, there's
proposed
no-
use would go to the planning commission.
would just- If something was brought to the planning commission about a parking lot construction, then it's pretty much out of our hand at that particular point in time. In other words, that's their decision to make. And, but this is like I say, right now, to my knowledge, there is nothing being considered by anybody, any of the property owners. There's no, of course, we have the ban on demolition of buildings, and like I say, so there's not a whole lot of area that we could use, that could be used to construct parking lots in the downtown historic overlay district right now. A couple of properties. But there's no plans right now for any of those properties that I'm aware of. As a member of the Planning Commission, Mr. Titterington, are you aware of anything that's in the pipeline?
No, but the only thing that's changed since the moratorium was enacted, and you know, it really wasn't a secret. I think it's on the record that one of the chief concerns had to do with the tavern building, the possibility of it coming down, and an earlier request that either the Planning Commission denied or that he pulled the application at the last minute. This is now almost 2 years ago, where he was asking to put a parking lot as the acceptable reuse plan. Jumping ahead, when he did file the application, it was instead done with green space in mind. That went to that was appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals said, you can demolish it, but you can't put it in green space. You have to come up with a building as reuse. That was approved by the BZA. That, of course, is now in the court, in the Common Pleas Court. However, the Planning Commission did approve the rendering of a building, and so at this point, barring any change, any contrary decision by the Common Pleas Court, and again, there is none, they're still, they still haven't decided at the court level, then the reuse plan that must be enacted as part of any demolition has to be a new building. So in other words, that can't be a parking lot if the demolition goes through. Other than that, there have been no plans submitted. I'm not even aware of any discussions at the staff level about any parking lots as principal uses.
So in that case,
or accessory uses for that matter, but definitely not principal uses.
Okay. So this, if we were going to make a change in the zoning, or ask for a change in the zoning laws prohibiting or highly restricting the construction of a single-level surface parking lot, this would be the time to do it because no property owners that we know of are currently considering that. Would that be a fair statement? We wouldn't be infringing on anybody's use of their property by doing that.
There's nobody in the process that would preclude being enforced against that kind of an ordinance.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay. So on the one hand, like I say, we can continue the moratorium on, like I say, we can also ask staff to give us some ideas on a more permanent solution to this. If nobody's in favor of, I mean, if we decide that we feel that the parking, as I've said before, the parking lots are not in the best interest of the city of Troy right now, then we could essentially do some changes in the zoning laws to restrict or prohibit this. And we may want to ask staff to come up with some ideas on that. Would that be something that we might be interested in?
I think we need more discussion.
Need more discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I'm just struggling to to figure out if just having something to do away with surface level parking lots is the entirety of that discussion. I mean, are we having a discussion about parking needs, or are we?
Well, that's a good question. Again, we can talk about parking needs. Again, looking over the studies, it was very evident that there was a lot of interest in developing multi-level parking facilities. I mean, I think there was very little interest in this single level, of a parking lot. But I think there was a lot of interest in developing a multi-level parking structure. And I know that we have included that in our 5-year plan. And so I guess we could be started looking at steps to look at that in more serious detail.
I think I'd need to have more information about any need for that before.
Did you read the Walker report?
Well, I know, but currently, any need or how we would finance a multi-level parking garage and where it would be located and who would participate in the maintenance. We've talked about going in with the county on that. I would just need a lot more discussion on that.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yes.
So just to remind you, I've got the 5-year capital plan in front of me. The Walker study did not recommend for or against. They merely gave us, not merely, but it was a pretty substantial report, but what capacity we could put on the North Cherry Street lot, what kind of design it would be, what the financials would look like. All right, so I don't recall them making any judgment call as to whether we need one or not. That was something that is really for our discussion, our decision at that whatever time. In the 5-year plan, in 2024, we put in some funds so that we could update the assessment and do a new, I guess, or an updated parking spot assessment and demand analysis. Then, assuming that there's justification for a multi-level structure, the following year is when we would pay for the detailed engineering design, and then in 2026 is when we would actually look at the construction. So we're a few years off. We've not heard any pressing demands to accelerate that, nor can we in good conscience recommend that to you given the current state of affairs with the capital program and the inflationary challenges. But just to kind of put that in perspective.
And you're right. I know I say it was in the budget, and I know it's down the road, but we obviously the more we take some opportunities to talk about this, the better understanding we get on this thing. And of course, one thing I would like to bring out of the Walker study is they did give us an estimate of what our parking needs would be in the next 10 years, which is adding 100 parking spots someplace in the downtown. And there's 2 ways that we can accomplish that. And again, if we look at what's happening downtown, we've got our southeast developments. We've got, of course, the Tavern building. Hopefully something will develop there. We've got the Masonic Temple coming back to life. We've got, there's a lot of good things happening in the downtown area, and it's all bringing people downtown, and they want places to park. And so the Walker study essentially told us that we needed about over 100 parking spaces in the next 10 years. And by my estimation, 100 parking spaces takes up almost a city block. So the question again would be, if we don't look at the parking structure, then what are we going to tear down to get those 100 spots? Where are we going to tear down? And the question is, do we wait for another natural disaster, like another natural disaster, have another tornado come in and wipe out a block of downtown Troy, to wait for a mega fire to break out and destroy a block that we can then say, okay, we're going to turn this into parking. I mean, but we don't have any extra land in downtown Troy to do this. That isn't under consideration already for development.
Well, I think part of the analysis also at the time would be, you're assuming that something central would have to be torn down to put such a structure or surface lot up. And depending on what the behavior patterns are in 3 or 4 years from now, something that may, with development occurring hopefully on the east side of West Market Street, or I'm sorry, South Market Street, and the demographics of the folks that we may be bringing and visiting and working downtown, the demand for parking right in the middle of everything may not be as great. So I don't know that, assuming that a structure has to come down, given that it is historic district, I don't want that to be the quote in the newspaper, to be honest with you.
Right,
Only because there might be other properties outside.
You look at the neighborhood. I mean, if we have more economic development in the area that you're talking about in the southeast part of downtown, that's all neighborhood housing right now. Again, there aren't too many large lots that we could use for parking. So again, we're either going to be tearing down houses, or we have to tear down something in order to get that number of spaces in that particular area as well. So the question is that I think we should look at a parking structure going forward. Spend some time with it over the next several years to make sure that we're all on the same page on this. I think that's basically what all these studies come out and say.
Well, that's true. You're absolutely right, but the Walker study did not include the impact on the general fund budget and the subsidy of several $100,000, maybe less, maybe more, depending on if we're in a charging situation or if it's free space, for the free spaces, what the quid pro quo might be with the county and any other entities, whether there'd be a public-private partnership that would be involved, and that's certainly something that in 2024 we would want to engage as part of the objectives of another analysis.
Okay. Why don't we open this up? The other council members here tonight have any questions or comments on what we're discussing? Mr. Roselle.
Patrick.
You want to come up to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Just curious of what the administration and staff's opinion is of the one-level parking lots that we've prohibited. Favor, against, not against?
It's hard to make a blanket recommendation to either prohibit or restrict, only because when you're dealing with the downtown and you don't know what's coming and you don't know where people are talking about, it's difficult to just be generic, to be honest. It's one of the reasons why we have the DRO overlay district in place. That was called out in the MKSK study 6 years ago now. Is it 2015? 7 years ago. And that's why they started recommending to us that we use more flexible zoning in this district, because it has so many zoning districts and it is so eclectic, and it's the unique downtown that it is. So to try to, I don't mean to dance around and answer your question, but it's difficult to.
I mean, we've made statements that this is in the best interest of Troy, but that's 9 of us saying it is. My question is, does our previous action fall in line with the views of the administration and staff?
When this moratorium was introduced, it was introduced because of uncertainty regarding the tavern building. Like I said, at the time the moratorium was passed, Surface parking was not an issue because the application that the Planning Commission was, had taken action on did not involve a parking lot. Since that time, as I mentioned, you know, the BZA rendered its decision. The applicant or the property owner came back to the Planning Commission. That plan, that reuse plan, does not involve a parking lot. It involves a new four-story structure.
Right, right. But again, if we pass some amendments if we somehow develop a restriction or a ban on parking, we can always rescind that if something wonderful, amazing comes up and knocks our socks off, right?
Well, yes, you could, but it would not be a very quick process because any zoning change requires not only the 3 readings, but the public hearing and then the effective
It takes a
date.
month. It takes 6 weeks.
No, it probably takes every bit of 2 months,
Yeah.
once all is said and done, if not more, depending on the timing.
You know, that's,
It seems to
And
me
you-
from listening to this that the original reason for our moratorium doesn't exist at this point. I'm not sure, I mean, we could certainly hear from the staff their opinions about making any changes to the zoning law, but not seeing anything in the works, I say at this point, we just let things go forward and hear from staff as we move forward at different planning times, when we're looking at 5-year plans, when we're looking at budgets, about whether or not it's time to talk about a multi-level parking structure. Because I just think that raises a whole lot of questions about the capital involved and the ongoing maintenance. And that's just a whole nother discussion. But if the moratorium is expired and we don't see the reason, need for a new one, and it doesn't sound like we do, then.
well, again, my statement about the moratorium, we're looking at restrictions now, is that we can't do that if somebody we can't say after the fact that somebody decides, hey, I got this wonderful idea, I'm gonna put this single level parking lot in the downtown Troy. If they come out and start talking about that to the Planning Commission, we have no say in the matter at that point. We've lost the ability to do that. So if we are proactive, we can look at, and all I'm saying is we need, ask the staff to give us some ideas on what we can do for consideration. Because if once the horse is out of the barn, we can't corral it back in. So as they say, I think in my mind, it might be better to look at this thing now instead of later. Yes, you're right, and I agree that right now there's nothing that says, like I say, that we have a couple of vacant lots in downtown Troy that could be turned into parking. But again, like I say, there's no plans for that right now. But if somebody starts coming up with plans, we're done. We can't restrict it at that particular. It goes to the zoning commission, or not the zoning, but the planning commission, and we lose our say in this thing.
I'm just not sure. I mean, I guess at that point I'd have to hear from staff about what zoning changes would be reasonable to restrict that use. If it's something that's coming through the DRO, we would have a say in it. If it's in the historic district and it's something that's allowed by the zoning code, then I'm just not sure what we can really say to, other than recommendations that staff would bring forward to us if they think that a property needs to be zoned differently, or general changes made to the zoning code. I'm just not sure about what recommendations, maybe staff can let us know, that you would see that you could make in a specific instance like this.
Well, each zoning district has a specific list of permitted principal uses. There is a catch-all where if it's similar to one that is listed, because you can never get every single one of them, then that also falls within the permitted. So if the desire was to prohibit principal use, I guess for pay, parking lots or parking lots that are the principal permitted use in the downtown, we'd have to be very specific that it is not allowed as a principal permitted use. Having said that, we would then have to analyze, and I don't have a zoning map in front of me, but in the downtown, certainly in the overlay district, I believe we have 13 different zoning districts. Within the center, within the core area of downtown, I can think of at least 3, if not more, different zoning districts that we have. And so each one of those would have to be amended to prohibit. And keep in mind that the zoning districts that are in the downtown are not unique to the downtown. So if you change something to the B3 district or the B2 district, and it could impact citywide any property that's within that particular zoning district. So there would be a lot of staff work, there'd be a lot of time just going through the rezoning process. And then, like you say, if somebody came and we found a need to reverse it, then you're talking about having to undo all the language that we put in and the additional 6 to 10 weeks that it could take just because the zoning process is very deliberate by state law.
Mr. Lutz.
Can I ask a procedural question? Mr. Titterington, if an applicant were to apply for a use within the DRO that was not a permitted principal use, they could still make that request using the DRO process, in which the Planning Commission and/or council could still approve that use even though it's not principally permitted, correct?
I'd have to defer to Mr. Davis. I believe that the DRO application builds on the uses that are in the underlying district, but Tim, you want to speak to that, please?
Yeah, to make sure I understand the question, if a DRO application came in for a use that is not a principal use,
Correct.
could that be put in? It could play into the overall factor of what the development is. So it could be tied together that way. And then if it goes through the DRO, it would go through the Planning Commission. If Planning Commission were to approve that, then City Council would have their option whether or not to hear that at the council level. So it would come before City Council through the DRO possibly.
No, the question is if the B2, if the B3 district specifically does not allow surface parking lots as principal permitted uses, can somebody still come in with a DRO asking for a principal permitted use as a parking lot? I don't have that section of the code.
Yeah, I would have to pull that. I would have to pull that section up and read that section to give you that.
I didn't think that an overlay could conflict with the underlying principal or permitted uses.
Because I know some of the benefits we talked about were in the DRO was not only flexibility in the physical building side, but also additional flexibility in use, if I remember correctly.
Flexibility in the use, but I don't know that the DRO can completely reverse or do the opposite of what the underlying district as a use allows or doesn't allow.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips.
If I may. I think that we need to think back to the origin of this discussion or the event that actually triggered this. And that was the tavern building having its damage done, and the applicant coming in and taking the easiest way, which is a usual and customary way with someone that does not have a reuse plan for an existing property or building if they're going to do a major demolition or something. The easy way out is to list seed and straw and or parking as a general end-all be-all, an easy way out, because they don't have plans in existence for a building or a business or something. That's what generated this discussion going back originally. And that created a mass hysteria, if you will, because that was never a use going to be done on that lot. It was. Discussion behind the scenes indicated that they were always looking to do a building of some sort. The land downtown is too expensive to put a parking lot on. Someone downtown is not going to make money off of their property if they take a building down and put a parking lot on. That's cold hard facts.
Yeah.
And then so it
Ask
doesn't.
the Hainers about that. How many buildings have they taken down to build parking lots?
Well.
And how about the lot there beside the old,
Mr. Schilling, those are, the Hainer is accessory, those are accessory to their use. The one that was put in place is one that's on Water Street that was attempted as a pay lot, and that is now up for sale. I don't think that ever.
okay, and then we have the one on Water Street, where the old hardware store used to be. I'm not, that's,
Down next to Maurice. Down next to.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Well, if I could finish my thought.
I'm sorry.
okay.
But the 96 Wolpert downtown study indicated that any business that comes into existence downtown, there is no requirement for them to have off-street or site parking. That puts the onus on the city.
Right.
So if somebody comes in and wants to put in a business and wants to put in their own parking, good on them, because that takes the responsibility and the cost off of us.
Right.
But by being too restrictive with what you're laying out here or suggesting in control or changing the ordinance, to me is just too restrictive, in my opinion. So I couldn't support it, but I think that we're building on something that really, when you come and start to think about it, the property is too expensive for some private person to create a lot and expect to make money with parking meters on it. So the reality of this is not going to have any effect. And so it's kind of an exercise, in my opinion, an exercise in futility. So that's the way I'm looking at it. Eventually, I've been a proponent of a multi-level parking lot for many, many years. Agree with that. And it is coming, but we're going to have to wait to get that down the road. Just because of budgeting.
Well, again, I say we have parking lots in downtown Troy right now that are privately owned, and evidently the owners are satisfied with the income that they're getting off of them because they're not for sale.
Well, they've been here forever, and there's been nothing done in 10 years except for the public parking lot that we have done, that have been new, if you will.
And the Hainers.
But that's an accessory use.
That's an accessory use to their property,
It's
to their
not a
business.
But they tore down houses to do that.
I don't care. It's an accessory use to their business that's existing.
Okay. Any discussion from the public before we close off our discussions? Any other comments from council on that? In my own mind, I would like to see some recommendations from staff on this, is what our options are before we make a final decision on this. Mr. Pierce, what would you like to do? Do you have any druthers on that?
On recommendations from staff?
I think in my own mind, I'd like to get some recommendations from staff, yes.
Can you be more specific, Mr. Schilling? Because I'm not sure, our recommendation isn't necessarily to make any changes.
Okay, you're right. I apologize for that. No, I would like to see, in other words, if I still think that we need to restrict or prohibit the single-level surface, single-use parking lots. And I would like, and I don't know whether we can not being up on this, but I don't know whether we can, how do we amend our zoning code to allow it to prohibit this type of thing? But I would, there's got to be some things that, and we may not, as I say again, they may come back and say we can't really do anything. But I would like to get some sort of a recommendation or some ideas from staff on what we could do going forward on this.
If the idea going forward is that you want to restrict the surface level parking lots, I think we've already heard the recommendation from staff on that, and that is that they would not recommend making wholesale changes to the zoning code in every district in the historic area, the downtown area, to do that. And I couldn't support asking for any other recommendations if we've heard that from them tonight. So I'm not sure, just after our discussion, I'm really not sure if we need to do anything. If we're not going to continue with the moratorium, and it doesn't sound as if we need to, and we know what the recommendation is on changing the zoning code, we know the multi-level parking structure is a future discussion, then I'm not sure what we would be asking staff to recommend beyond what we've heard tonight.
Again, all I'd like to say on that is that right now, you're right, right now there's no plans to do anything by anybody, but if somebody develops some plans on property, we have no recourse on that. It goes to the planning commission. We can't do anything as long as it meets the current zoning codes.
But
so in other words,
we leave lots of things that go to the planning commission, and I guess at this point I would have to say I would let the planning commission decide. If it's something that involves the DRO, then we have the ability to review that and ask to see it. But I'm just not seeing this rise to the level of a concern that would cause multiple changes to the zoning code.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can interrupt, we may have a better answer to Mr. Lutz's initial question, or his question earlier. The DRO section, F, permitted uses. In addition to the permitted accessory and temporary uses allowed by a site's underlying conventional zoning district, again, in addition to, DRO site plan approval may allow for other residential, office, retail, industrial, entertainment, and similar uses, which at the discretion of the Planning Commission and/or City Council, because again, these can come to you at your discretion, that are compatible with the site redevelopment plan and complementary to the uses in the existing immediate neighborhood. So again, DRO site plan approval may allow for that, subject to Planning Commission recommendation and approval by the council.
So what you're saying is that if somebody wants to build a parking lot, that it would have it.
You could prohibit and go through all of this like Mrs. Snee said, which is not our recommendation, and somebody could still come with a DRO application and ask to override the underlying zoning. But again, you're talking about changing multiple zoning district
but that's the best. I mean, that would be I think that would work very well, because again, we basically prohibited. The only way that they could override that prohibition is come to us with as I say, a plan that knocks their socks off. And then the DRO could step in and say, okay, hey, we can do this, right?
If that's the way you want to look at it, I mean, we can certainly look at that.
Is that how you read that section, no?
Yeah, that's how I would interpret that section, yes.
Any other comments? What do we want to do here?
I don't think there is anything for us to do.
Let's shut it, let's not move forward with it.
Okay. Okay, we are done. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Are you adjourned?